Welcome back to 110 Daily. All right, Chris, we have excellent college basketball tonight. Champions Classic, Michigan State Duke, followed by Kentucky Kansas. These are obviously four of the most storied programs in college basketball history, four high profile coaches, all kinds of big time recruits. Where do you want to start? What are you looking forward to most?
Yeah, so I guess let's start with the Michigan State Duke game, I guess, because that's the first game of the night, right?
Yep.
Normally, of course, this tournament or this event is held on the opening night of the season, so it's already pretty unique in that it's happening like 3 weeks later than it normally would be. And every team here has played at least one game. But there are a lot of questions with a lot of these teams. As far as the Michigan State Duke game, um, you've got a Duke team that is something of an enigma right now. I don't think we quite know anybody quite knows what to expect with this Duke team. They beat Coppin State in their first game. I think they're a Duke team that they were a bit sloppy in that first game.
Very.
I think this is a Duke. I mean, they were very sloppy, 22 turnovers. They also missed 6 of their 10 free throws. So there are some, but again, I don't like to try to make too much out of those individual first non-conference games. You're trying to get guys in. They have experience returning, but I also think they're in a situation where they might be relying on some freshmen who Jalen Johnson had a very impressive first game, but also a lot of those turnovers. They're going to be in a situation where they're kind of relying on some of those freshmen, even though they have some of the returning players. Michigan State, they won against Eastern Michigan and Notre Dame by double digits. The thing I saw from them is a pretty balanced scoring attack. Four of their players right now are averaging at least 10 points per game through those first two games. I'm watching to see how the two coaches manage their rotations in tonight's game. Duke doesn't really have a typical low post big man. Michigan State has a lot of options. They can go small, they can go big. There's a lot of moving pieces to manage, so I'm interested to see how that all plays out. Um, so a lot of different storylines here. I'm not going to give my prediction now because I assume we'll save that for a minute or two. What are you watching tonight?
Yeah, the biggest thing I'm curious about are Jalen Johnson and GJ Stewart ready for
Mm-hmm.
this? They combined for
Right.
43 points, 28 rebounds, and 7 assists against Coppin State.
Yeah.
They were fantastic. Nobody else on that Duke team scored more than 13 points. This is a different animal,
Mm-hmm.
especially
A little bit.
when you're looking at some of the experience that this Michigan State team has, whether it's Joey Hauser, Josh Langford, Aaron Henry, a lot of those guys that are going to be playing sort of between the shooting guard and power forward positions. They've played a lot of college basketball at this point. Aaron Henry is a phenomenal defender. So are they going to be able to have the same kind of impact? We see it year after year with Kentucky in particular, Duke teams in the past. But the difference between this Duke recruiting class and some of the other ones in previous seasons is that yes, these guys are high profile recruits, but we're not talking about having Zion, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish 1, 2, 3.
Right.
These are still high 4 or 5 star guys, top 15, top 20, top 30, whatever. But they're not top five, the best of the high school prospects. So are they ready to be every bit as good as some of these other Duke freshmen have been? And for Michigan State, as you alluded to, who becomes the guy? Is there a guy that can sort of emerge here? Foster Loyer was terrific shooting the ball in game one, didn't do much against Notre Dame. Aaron Henry led the team with 14 points in that win over Notre Dame. They're balanced, which is good, but you also need to have somebody eventually who can take a game over. And then the other thing is that defensive performance we saw against Notre Dame legit? Can Michigan State be that good defensively? Now, they're not going to go on another 26-0 run like they did against the Fighting Irish, but a lot of that had to do with the defensive intensity they brought. They just made life miserable for Notre Dame. So those are the things that I'm looking for. What do Duke's freshmen look like? Are they ready to rise to the challenge, or was that just they're playing players that are nowhere near their talent level, where now these are guys that are every bit as good as they are? And Michigan State, can there be a go-to guy that develops, and what is their ceiling defensively?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think If this kind of leads into my prediction for this game, if we want to just give our predictions as we
Sure.
go, which is my prediction is Michigan State. I think in an empty Cameron, it's a weird season. I'm going with the experience of Joshua Langford, of Aaron Henry, of Joey Hauser. Like you said, there's I'm gonna side. That's gonna be the tiebreaker for me because obviously you can make a case either way. Obviously, if Jalen Johnson and DJ Stewart show up in the same way that they did against Coppin State, it's a different story. But that's of course the big question for like that you said is, are they ready to step up and be those guys? Like how good are they? And is their house slot? Is it going to be are there going to be growing pains? Like is it going to be smooth? Is it going to be bumpy? And I'm going to go with the experience and against a Duke team that's a bit of a mystery. They're filling new holes. There is that uncertainty. So for me, it's really that simple. I mean, I'm sure you could make it a lot more complicated than that. But for me, it's really an experience thing for me, given everything we just talked about and the unique nature of this season. I think that for me, that's why I'm going with Michigan State to win this game. How about you?
I'm picking Michigan State as well. They don't have a great track record in this
No,
competition.
they don't.
They always have a bad loss in there at the beginning somewhere. It's
Mm-hmm.
just how Tom Izzo teams work. And then they start picking things up in Big Ten play, and then they're good in the NCAA tournament. I just, I don't really feel like that bad loss is going to come tonight, though. For
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, yeah, I need to see more from Duke. Obviously, they haven't had a chance to prove it, but been really impressed with what I've seen from Michigan State so far. I just don't think this Duke team is as good as Duke teams in the past, which could bode actually better for them, I might argue, in the NCAA tournament, but not in the regular
Mm-hmm.
season, not in a situation like this. I would be picking Duke if there were fans, but that part of this
Mm-hmm.
is also a factor. Yeah, I'll go with the experience in this bizarre world we're living in.
Yeah, 100%. Kansas and Kentucky. We're ready to talk about that one because
Yeah.
that's an interesting one. These are both teams that are looking to rebound from 12-point losses that they had at some point in their first week of action. Neither of those losses were, yeah, obviously, neither of those losses were great losses, but neither of them were horrible either. Kansas losing to Gonzaga, 77, who had 77% 2-point shooting in that game. Kentucky fell at home to Richmond, of course. Um, and I think you guys talked about that
Yep.
yesterday. Um, so for me, when it comes to Kansas, they have, compared to Kentucky, they have more key returning players. Marcus Garrett, the NABC Defensive Player of the Year. Um, they have their two wings returning, including Christian Braun, who's averaging 19 points per game through their first two
Coming
games.
coming off a
Uh,
30-point performance.
yeah, yeah, 30-point performance. That was which game was that?
St. Joe's.
That was the St. Joe's. Okay, they played St. Joe's after Gonzaga. Yeah. Um, so he's coming off a big game. They have more key returners coming back compared to Kentucky, which, like you said, fell to Richmond. And when it comes to Kentucky, I feel like there's going to be, and this is going to lead into my prediction, but I'll let you, I won't give the prediction. For Kentucky, I expect some real growing pains for this team this season. They're returning less than 8% of their minutes from last year. Like, that's just such a small amount. They were 0 for 10 on 3-point shots against Richmond, along with 13 missed free throws and 21 turnovers. Uh, Given the lack of experience on that roster right now, I just see a situation that's going to be bumpy for Kentucky. I'm not saying that they won't get there. I'm not saying it won't be figured out. I'm not even saying that the ceiling is anything other than very high. But I just see a situation where I would be very surprised if we're looking back, a few weeks, a month from now, and seeing a team that didn't have some peaks and valleys, or at least some periods where you know, they have to learn, some learning experiences where things go wrong and they have to pull it back together. But I won't give my prediction just yet. You can probably guess. But what are you looking for in this game, Josh?
Yeah, it's the same story with Kentucky every season. You
Mm-hmm.
have the head scratching, and losing to Richmond is not head scratching, but
Right.
the I maybe I should make it a little bit less extreme. The loss where everybody goes, "Oh my goodness, this team is a dumpster fire. How in the world did we think that they're a Final Four contender? They're not going to win the SEC, blah, blah, blah." And then more times than not, they figure it out and either are really good in the NCAA tournament and really good come March, even if they don't have a good season, or like last year, they lose to Evansville, and by the end of the regular season, you're talking about them as legitimate Final Four contenders. Don't need to
Right.
freak out. This is the reality of the way John Calipari runs his program. And yeah, you talked about the limited returning. That number is basically zero right now because Keon Brooks isn't playing.
Right.
It is an entirely new roster. It is the newest roster of the Calipari era, according to Kentucky Athletics, because of these transfers that are coming in too. So the two things, basically, my question is, can Kentucky fix their problems? And I see two in particular, in addition to the poor shooting numbers you've already referenced. The 21
Mhm.
turnovers and the fact that BJ Boston, Terrence Clark, and Olivier Sarr had 52 of their 64 points. The two freshmen are going to be great. Sarr is going to be good. He's experienced coming from Wake Forest. He knows what it's like to play college basketball at the high level. It's a different world at Kentucky, obviously, but I'm not. He's been good so far. Where is it coming after that? I'm a big Davion Mintz fan. He needs to be better. Hopefully they get Brooks back soon. But who are your other options? You can't just have three guys score the basketball. And then for Kansas, can they start figuring things out defensively? Like you said, Marcus Garrett is arguably the best defender in the country. They should be really good guarding the perimeter, and Gonzaga just took them to school. Now, Gonzaga is an elite offensive team, so there's not too much shame in that, but you should still not be giving up 100 points.
Right.
So can they be better in that regard? And then also, yeah, what does this offense look like? Because it's been good so far. They're averaging 92 points a game. You mentioned Christian Braun, who had 30 against St. Joe's.
Hmm.
Abaji was good against Gonzaga. They got good with Marcus Garrett. I think it was 22 points he had in that game. They're scoring the basketball, which was one of my concerns about this team. Is you just kind of look at it and assume Abaji's going to be really good. Marcus Garrett will take another step and it'll all be fine. You throw in Bryce Thompson. But they lost so much in that duo of Azubuike and Dodson from last season. And so they need to defend better, but so far it's been good on the offensive end, which was almost my bigger concern. So can they keep that going? Can we get some scoring options to emerge? Was Christian Braun just a fluke, or is he a guy that can give you 20 points sometimes and average 14? That's what I'm looking for on the Kansas side. It's just sort of how do they respond from being and not destroyed by Gonzaga because they stayed in that game, but clearly outplayed and just kind of being helpless defensively against another really talented team, but a team that, for all of the questions I have about Kansas's inexperience, at least those players by and large have been there before in some role, where this Kentucky team is brand new.
Right. And that leads into my prediction, which I'm sure was pretty clear, and I'm guessing might be the way you go as well. Maybe not. Is that I'm predicting Kansas here for much the same reason as Michigan State in a very oversimplified way, it just being experience. And I'm going to side with the club with more experience returning, given all the things we've talked about. And again, just this emphasis from that I've said it before, that this Kentucky team is going to have these swings back and forth, and it would not surprise me at all if they swing back the right direction and they get something going here. Like, it's not going to surprise me if they, and I'm not saying that they're necessarily in a flip the switch situation, but it wouldn't surprise me if they flip the switch and they just they start clicking on all, firing on all cylinders at any point. The talent is obviously there. There's no doubt about that, the potential. But I'm not gonna, I can't predict that happening. I can't, when all things, in comparing it to a team that has sort of those consistent forces where, again, there are questions, like you laid them out really well with Kansas, but there are certainties. There are just more certainties, more things you can count on, players being at least serviceable, good, solid, even if not great. And there's just so many unknowns right now with this Kentucky team. I'm not, again, like you said, I'm not concerned long term. This is what they do, but I just can't. I don't have enough reason to predict that them winning. I just don't have enough reason versus Kansas. There's just I'm going to go with a little bit more certainty. Maybe that even if I don't feel like there's a super high ceiling for them right now in this exact moment. I mean, and there is obviously, but even if I don't, even if it's a little bit of a safer play, I'm going with Kansas to win tonight in this game.
And there are one or two teams in the country, depending on your opinion and your analysis of Baylor, that don't have questions right now.
Right.
That's it. So the idea that Kansas is not solidified is not concerning to me.
Sure.
I'm also going with Kansas, and in addition to wanting to rely on the experience earlier in the season, I'm also picking Kansas because, quite frankly, I just think Kansas is the better basketball team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's as good of a reason as any.
I have my questions. I picked Baylor to win the Big 12, but you can't dispute what you're getting from Marcus Garrett and that supporting cast. I'm not sure how good they can be, but we've already seen some struggles from the SEC. I thought the SEC could be really interesting this year, and then it's just kind of been a train wreck. LSU loses to St. Louis, and it keeps Alabama gets handled by Zaire Williams and Stanford. It's not been a great start. Obviously, Kentucky also loses. We're waiting on Tennessee. That's kind of the one hope for this conference right now, unless somebody turns things around. I think Kentucky's ultimately going to be fine. I'm not backing down on my pick for them to win the SEC, but I like Kentucky at the end of the season much better than at the beginning. I just think that Kansas is the better basketball team now, and ultimately will probably end up being the better basketball team, though Kentucky could close that gap.
Yeah, well said. I certainly agree with that assessment.
That is our Champions Classic preview. Again, Michigan State, Duke, followed by Kentucky and Kansas. We're going to take another break. When we come back, it is time to talk baseball and for Chris to bring his sort of weekly topic of conversation. Looking forward to that. You won't want to miss it. You're watching 110 Daily.